They offered you a cup, and you drank. You didn't know it was poisoned. How could you? It was presented with the warmth of a parent's smile, the reassurance of a teacher's nod, the gentle authority of voices that claimed to know better. Their hands were steady as they poured it, the liquid swirling like truth in motion. You took it because you were told it would help you grow, because the alternative was to starve under their silent disapproval. But inside that cup was not nourishment. It was a slow venom measured in lies. Lies about who you are, lies about what you can't do, lies about the limits you must never cross. The taste was sweet at first, sweet enough that you didn't notice the bitterness waiting to bloom in your veins. It seeped into you quietly. You carried it in your blood, thinking it was your own. It shaped the way you saw yourself, tinting the mirror with their design. They told you you were small, and so you folded yourself smaller. They told you the world was dangerous, and so you chained your own hands. They told you you were lucky to have what little you had, and so you learned to bow in gratitude for crumbs. They repeated these things not once, but again and again, until the voice in your head began to sound like theirs. You didn't question it, not yet. After all, the lie was everywhere, in their tone, in their rules, in the way their eyes searched you for evidence that you still believed. But poison is never content to simply weaken. It wants to own. It wants to be the architect of your thoughts, the governor of your movements. And so it spread. You began to measure yourself against an invisible standard you could never meet. You lived under the suspicion that you were inherently flawed, that you were somehow not enough. This was by design. Weakness makes you malleable. Doubt makes you obedient. If they could convince you that your only safety lay in their approval, you would spend your life chasing it and never notice the cage. Yet somewhere inside, a fragment of you refused to die. You couldn't name it then. It was a quiet ember, barely noticeable under the ash of self-doubt, but it was there. Every time they lied to you, every time they disguised control as care, every time they wrapped manipulation in the fabric of love, that ember burned a little hotter. You didn't understand it, but you felt it, a pulse in the darkness, an unblinking eye behind your thoughts. And so, without meaning to, they began to sharpen you. Every falsehood they fed you became a point of contrast, a tiny fracture line between their world and something deeper. You started to sense the shape of their deceit, though you couldn't yet trace it. The tone of their voice when they lied felt different. The shift in their posture when they concealed the truth became noticeable. You were still drinking from the poisoned chalice, but your tongue had begun to recognize the taste. The sweetness no longer fooled you. What they didn't foresee was how the venom would evolve inside you. Poison, after all, has a second life. In small enough doses, it ceases to kill and begins to strengthen. Your body learns its language. Your mind begins to adapt. You no longer take their words at face value. You hear the gaps, the hesitations, the things unsaid. You begin to see the invisible architecture of manipulation, the scaffolding that holds their power in place. It's not as solid as they would have you believe. You start to realize that their control over you has always depended on your belief in it. That realization is the first crack in the glass. And cracks, once they appear, only spread. You replay moments in your mind, the smiles that never reached their eyes, the advice that benefited them more than you, the rules that bent when it served their comfort. The past starts to reassemble itself in a different shape, one where you were never the failure, only the subject of a carefully maintained illusion. It's a violent kind of clarity, the kind that steals your breath and leaves you standing alone in the cold air of truth. Now you see that the cup they offered was never meant to heal you. It was meant to keep you dependent. It was a leash disguised as a gift. But here is where the story changes. The poison didn't just fail to destroy you. It rewrote you. It rewired your instincts. Where once you followed blindly, now you read between the lines. Where once their words struck deep, Now they strike a surface hardened beyond their reach. The very substance they use to weaken you has become the catalyst of your awakening. They will not admit this. They will sense it before they see it. In your stillness when they expect a reaction. In your questions when they expect submission. They will test you, push you, attempt to pour another cup, but the taste will betray them every time. You'll sip nothing they offer without dissecting its flavor. You'll no longer drink because they command it, only if you choose to. And when you do, you'll drink knowing the venom can no longer harm you. It belongs to you now. The poisoned chalice remains in their hand, but its power has shifted. You've taken its measure. You've learned the weight of its lies, the shape of its deceit. You no longer drink blindly. You study, and in that study, you turn their gift into your weapon. You've become fluent in their language, not to obey, but to use. The words that once wounded now serve as signals, each lie a breadcrumb leading you closer to the core of their machinery. You are no longer the naive one at the table. You are the silent witness, the archivist of every manipulation, the quiet collector of their tells. You carry the poison still, but now it runs cold, no longer burning your veins. It waits in you, dormant but ready, should the day come when you choose to let it spill back toward them. The chalice was never the danger. Believing it was your only drink was, and now you know there is more than one cup in the room. They told you who you were before you had the language to disagree. Their words wrapped around you like a shroud, tailored to fit their version of you, not your truth. Every insult, every smirk, every quiet correction that carried the weight of a verdict, they etched it into the glass you were forced to look through. And so you stared at your reflection, believing it, a reflection assembled from their hands, their eyes, their whispered judgments. You thought the fractures in the mirror were your own doing. You thought you were born broken. You didn't know that every crack was carved with intention. But the mirror doesn't lie. Not really. It remembers. It stores every glance they gave you when you stumbled. It keeps the frozen smile they wore when they told you that you'd never be enough. The glass has been recording, even when you weren't aware of it. Somewhere deep inside, in a vault of shadow and silence, every detail has been archived. You didn't lose those moments. You buried them. You didn't erase their voices. You locked them away where no one could tamper with them. That's why sometimes, late at night, you catch yourself hearing a word you thought you'd forgotten. A tone, a rhythm, a taste of venom you swallowed long ago. You were never just their victim. You were their witness. The mirror, cruel as it seemed, was only ever a messenger. It showed you the lies they built around you over and over, until you memorized the architecture. You began to recognize the way their smiles bent at the edges, the way their truths trembled when pressed, the way their certainty relied on your silence. And though you couldn't fight them then, you were already learning their language. You became fluent in the subtle weight of a pause, the sharp flicker in the eyes that comes just before a deception. They thought they were shaping you into something compliant. Instead, they were teaching you how to see. There's a difference between looking at a reflection and looking through it. At first, you saw only what they allowed you to see, the flawed, hesitant version of yourself they wanted you to believe in. But somewhere between the cracks, light leaked in. You started noticing what was behind the image, the scaffolding of manipulation, the fingerprints of their control. And once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. The mirror became less of a trap and more of a map. Every distortion was a clue, every fracture a passage to another truth. The ghosts began to appear slowly, not as phantoms that haunt, but as quiet archivists stepping out from the edges of your vision. They carried fragments of moments, the night they laughed at your ambition, the morning they dismissed your pain, the subtle shift in their tone when you spoke an unwelcome truth. At first, these ghosts frightened you. You thought they were remnants of your weakness, but they weren't. They were evidence. They were witnesses to every betrayal. They had waited in the silence, patient and unblinking, until you were ready to see them. They don't speak in words. They speak in the tilt of a head, the memory of a slammed door, the cold air that filled the room after an unspoken threat. They remind you not to trust the smile without the eyes, not to believe the apology that arrives only when they've been caught. They remind you that the reflection they gave you was never yours to keep. And when you begin to listen, really listen, you realize the ghosts aren't warning you anymore. They're instructing you. You start carrying these instructions without even thinking about it. In a crowded room, you see the same micro-expressions that once ruled your life. The flicker of insecurity they try to hide. The way their voice catches when their story frays at the edges. You see it all because you've seen it before. Because your mirror has been showing you for years. You no longer walk blind into the traps they set for others. You step lightly around them, unseen, unheard, and utterly aware. It's strange, the power that comes from observation. They still think you're slow to react, that you're the same fragile thing they once molded. They don't realize you've been studying the angles of their deception for as long as they've been feeding it to you. They can't imagine that the reflection they left you with has become your camouflage, that you wear it like a mask, letting them believe you still see yourself the way they want you to. They don't know that the mask lets you move closer without raising suspicion, that while they think they're manipulating you, you're mapping every move they make. The ghosts watch with you now. They stand behind your eyes when someone lies. They tighten your focus when someone tries to steer your thoughts. They are the silent counsel in the back of your mind, nodding when you recognize a pattern, smiling when you refuse to take the bait. And when you meet the eyes of someone who once held power over you, the ghosts are there too, calm, still, unafraid. Because they know what you know, the reflection was never yours, and the person staring back at them now isn't the one they shaped. You realize that the mirror is no longer a prison. It's a weapon. Every angle of it has been sharpened by years of falsehood. You could cut them with it if you wanted, slice through the illusions they live behind. But you don't need to. You've learned that the greatest damage comes from letting them see themselves in it. No filter, no distortion, just the raw truth staring back. That's when they flinch. That's when they avert their gaze. Because deep down they know you've always seen them. And now they know you've never looked away. The ghosts are no longer whispers. They are the steady pulse beneath your composure. They remind you that you're not broken. You're recorded. You're archived. You're layered in evidence so dense it becomes armor. And when they try to tell you who you are again, you don't argue. You don't explain. You simply let them see their reflection in your silence. Because your silence is no longer the absence of power. It is the presence of every truth they hoped you'd forget, standing quietly at your side. And in that moment, the mirror belongs to you. Every lie they fed you is still there, etched into its surface, but now it's inverted, reversed. It no longer shows you what they wanted you to see. It shows you them, stripped of disguise, cornered by their own reflection. They can't stand in front of it for long. They never could. And that is how you know the ghosts have done their work. That is how you know the glass is yours. And from this moment on, it will never be used against you again. They thought you would stay lost. They thought the labyrinth they built for you would hold forever, that the walls of deceit and shame would keep you crawling in circles until you collapsed. But while they mistook your silence for surrender, something far more dangerous was happening. In the shadows of your suffering, you began to chart it. You mapped every corner of their cruelty, every turn where they tried to break you, Every pit they dug to bury you, pain became your compass, betrayal became your ink. You traced the jagged outlines of their falsehoods until the terrain of their lies was etched into you as clearly as the veins on the back of your hand. At first you moved through that landscape blindly, stumbling into the same traps again and again. You didn't yet know you were walking through a design, but with each fall you began to recognize patterns, subtle repetitions in the way they smiled before they cut you, the way their tone shifted when they needed you to doubt yourself. You started to notice the pressure points in their world, the paths they always returned to, the exits they kept hidden. Without knowing it, you were learning their language, the unspoken dialect of manipulation and control. What they fed you was never nourishment, it was poison, and yet you found a way to metabolize it. You learned the taste of every toxin, the burn of every venom they poured into you. You began to measure doses, to know exactly which strain of lie they preferred in moments of weakness, and which one they saved for when you were closest to freedom. You cataloged them the way a hunter studies his prey, patiently, silently, with the precision of someone who has nothing left to lose. The more they spoke, the clearer the map became. You began to see the architecture beneath their chaos, the invisible scaffolding of control that they believed no one could see, but you did. You saw how each deception connected to another like the spokes of a wheel, how each insult was not a stray blow but part of a greater design meant to keep you fixed in place. You realized that the labyrinth was not infinite, it was repeating, and the moment you see the repetition, the trap begins to weaken. Every scar you carry is a landmark now, every wound is a signpost pointing to the truth. You know exactly where the ground is soft beneath their feet, where the tunnels collapse, where the air smells different just before the next betrayal, and in learning their territory so well, you've done something they never expected. You've built your own routes, secret passages they cannot see, ways to move through their world without being seen, without being touched. It is a strange kind of power, this cartography of pain. You do not flaunt it, you do not announce it, because to name it is to warn them, and they must never be warned. Your knowledge exists in the tension between what they believe and what you now know. You watch them build their illusions with the same bricks they've used before, oblivious to the fact that you've already marked each one on your internal map. You see the cracks forming before they do. You feel the weight of their structure shifting, straining, ready to fall. They will never understand that the longer they tried to trap you, the deeper they buried the blueprints into your mind. They will never realize that each time you were betrayed, you marked the location like a surveyor marking the stars. Their arrogance was your apprenticeship, their cruelty was your training ground. Every humiliation, every forced surrender, every hour you spent doubting yourself, those were coordinates, and now you hold them all. There is a strange stillness that comes with this knowledge. You no longer move frantically through their maze. You walk slowly, deliberately, because you know exactly where you are. You can stand in the center of their game and feel no fear because you already know the way out. More than that, you know the way in. The paths they think are invisible are now lit in your mind like constellations. You could follow them to their heart, to the place where their power is most fragile. They believe they are still the cartographers, still drawing the lines that define your world. They do not yet see that the map they work from is a forger. The real map, the one that shows the hidden paths and collapsing bridges, belongs to you now, and you will never give it back. You can predict them in ways they cannot predict themselves. You know which lies they reach for when cornered, which truths they will distort when desperate, which fears drive them when the mask begins to slip. You can see the next move forming in their mind before their lips even part. There is an elegance to this reverse. You no longer have to fight them on their terms. You can let them believe the lie they've always told themselves, that you are still contained, and while they play their old game, you can walk unseen through the blind spots they've left unguarded. You know where their gaze never falls. You know where their memory falters. You know where the walls they built are nothing more than painted shadows. The cartography of pain is not something you chose to learn. It was carved into you piece by hands that thought they were destroying you, but they were not destroying you. They were drafting you. You are no longer the lost traveler in their labyrinth. You are the one holding the master key. You know every hidden chamber, every false corridor, every place where the ground shifts underfoot. You carry their entire world inside your mind, and that makes you more dangerous than they can even conceive. And so you wait, not with fear, but with precision. You wait because maps are not meant to be used all at once. They are meant to be followed when the moment is right. When the landscape itself is ready to change. You carry your knowledge like a blade sheathed in silence, knowing that the first cut will be the last they ever see coming, because the truth is no longer just a direction you're heading toward. It is the terrain you now walk upon, and it bends to you. They never told you that darkness has its own kind of light, that when they poured their venom into you, when they whispered their false prophecies into your bones, they were sowing the very seeds of their undoing. You were not supposed to survive the dosage. You were meant to crumble quietly, dissolve into the narrative they wrote for you, a ghost in the margins of their story. But poison changes under pressure. It mutates. It rewrites the chemistry of the soul it touched. And somewhere in that silent, brutal alchemy, you began to forge yourself. You didn't even know it at first. The breaking felt like dying. The doubt felt like drowning, but beneath the collapse there was heat, and in that heat, the impurities began to burn away. They told you that fear was proof of your weakness, but in truth, fear was the first metal you ever learned to smelt. It became the furnace in which you tested your limits. Their lies told you to bow your head, but the act of bending became an art of measuring. You learned the angle at which one can bend without breaking. The moment the pressure becomes structural knowledge, every humiliation was a strike of the hammer, every dismissal a fold in the steel. What they believed was compliance was in fact the slow folding of the blade you were becoming. And the more they tried to temper you into something brittle, the sharper your edge became. They gave you doubt as if it were a chain, but you studied the weight of it. The clink of each link, the way it scraped against your skin, until you could tell by sound alone which link would break first. Doubt became the schematics for your escape. It taught you to see the flaws in every cage, to hear the hollowness in every command. You began to see their authority, not as unshakable, but as a trembling facade stitched together with fragile threads. You watched the hands behind the curtain, the hesitation in their eyes when they repeated the same control tactics too often. You learned their patterns as a hunter learns the heartbeat of its prey. They told you no one would ever believe you, that your truth was too strange, too fragmented, too unworthy to be heard. But in the silence they forced upon you, something ancient stirred. You learned the language of quiet observation, the art of listening between words. In the stillness, you could hear the mechanisms of their lies turning like clockwork. You could feel the spaces where they faltered, the gaps they feared you'd notice, and you noticed. Always, silence became your laboratory. You could place their lies under a microscope and watch them decay in real time, every mutation revealing its original source. You became fluent in the unspoken dialect of power. You started to collect their weapons without them realizing. An insult here, a manipulation there, each one labeled and stored like stolen artifacts. You disassembled them in your mind, examined the way they were built, the way they were meant to wound, and once you understood their construction, you could rebuild them, not to harm yourself, but to turn against their creators. This was the truest alchemy. taking the exact toxin they administered and reshaping it into an antidote so potent it burned them instead. They believed they were arming themselves. They never realized they were filling your arsenal. Even your grief became a tool. They thought grief was a cage, a slowing of your step, a fog to make you stumble. But grief taught you endurance in ways joy never could. It slowed the world down until you could see its moving parts. It gave you patience, the kind that can outlast any siege. It showed you that time is a blade of its own, not always swift but devastating in its inevitability. You could wait longer than they could lie. You could outlast their masks. You could remain when they had already collapsed under the weight of their own performance. They mistook your stillness for defeat, but stillness was where the transmutation happened. Stillness was where the chaos they gave you melted into strategy. You learned that when you stop reacting, you stop feeding them, and when you stop feeding them, they starve. The old you would have lashed out, would have tried to prove something, to reclaim dignity through noise. The you forged in shadow has no need for such displays. You know now that the most devastating blow is often delivered without a sound. They taught you to see yourself as a fracture, but fractures are where the light gets in and where the light escapes. The cracks in you became channels for something stronger than you had ever known. Not hope in the way they peddled it, soft and docile, but a kind of raw, burning clarity. The kind that can cut through fog, through deceit, through the carefully constructed illusions of those who would control you. And once you have seen through them, you cannot unsee. Once the gold of understanding fills the cracks, the vessel is no longer breakable in the same way. They told you that your shadow was shame, but you stepped into it and found that it was not empty. It was rich soil, fertile with the remnants of every buried truth. It was the workshop where you dismantled the machinery of their lies piece by piece, reassembling it into something that served you. You found that the shadow was not your prison, but your sanctuary. In the dark, no one could see what you were building. In the dark, you were free to experiment, to fail, to refine. The alchemy was never about erasing what they did. It was about using it, folding it into the alloy of who you are now. They will never understand how it happened, how the words meant to fracture you became the blueprint for your reconstruction, how the venom meant to kill you became the ink with which you now write their undoing. They will never see the exact moment the scales tipped, the precise second their power began to bleed into your hands. But you know, you've always known. Because the day you stopped seeing yourself as the victim of their lies was the day you began using those lies as your weapon. And now, there is no alchemy left to perform. The transformation is complete. You carry their darkness in your palm, and you have learned exactly how to wield it. They noticed before you did, long before you traced the patterns in their words, long before you learned to read the tremor in their breath. There were eyes on you, not the obvious kind, not the friendly gaze that pretends to see you. These were the other eyes, the ones that never blink, the ones hidden in the seams of reality. You moved through the world thinking you were small, thinking you were harmless, but to them you were an anomaly, a variable, something unpredictable growing in a garden they believed was under their control. The first time you refused to break, they felt it, a ripple in the current, a deviation in the script, and they do not like deviations. They do not sit together in rooms lit by candles or war maps. They don't need to. Their network is older than you, older than the stories that built the cage around your thoughts. They communicate in glances, in silences, in the absence of coincidence. Somewhere, without your permission, you were added to a list, a file that marks you as one who no longer swallows the feed they've been pouring into your mouth since you could speak. Your defiance is not loud. That's what unsettles them. Rebellion they can crush, anger they can provoke into making mistakes. But quiet quiet is dangerous. Quiet watches. Quiet counts the steps between their lies and the truth. Quiet learns the shape of their fear. Once you thought they were untouchable, silhouettes perched on towers above the world. Now you see the cracks. You see the way their confidence fractures when your gaze lingers a moment too long. They've begun to test you, offering sharper lies, more intricate traps. They want to see if your awakening was an accident or an infection. They want to know if it will spread, and in those tests you give them nothing, not rage, not compliance, only the silence that unnerves them more than any declaration. Silence is your shield, and the longer you hold it, the more they realize they can't read you anymore. That terrifies them. You've learned the oldest truth. Power fears what it cannot predict. And so the Council of Watchers, though you will never see them assembled, leans in closer. Somewhere in the shifting corridors of power, your name has weight. They whisper about you the way soldiers speak of storms, not yet here, but coming. They begin to wonder, have they underestimated you, or have they simply misunderstood what you are? That uncertainty works in your favor. It buys you time. It forces hesitation, and hesitation is a fracture that grows with every second you stand unshaken. You are no longer prey in their eyes, but you are not yet an equal. You exist in that dangerous space between. The moment the hunted stops running and begins to turn its head, this unsettles the order they've relied on for decades, maybe centuries. There is a protocol for threats. There is no protocol for variables, and you are becoming one. Your movements are studied. Your silence is analyzed. They will prod. They will lure. They will feign alliance if it means understanding how you slipped through the net they thought was flawless. There is an old symbol buried in forgotten histories, the eye within the storm. It is not the storm itself, but the stillness at its heart. That is you now. They circle, sensing violence in your stillness, sensing the inevitability of what approaches. Some will attempt to draw you out with promises, others with fear. You must give them neither. You understand now that they are not omnipotent gods, but fragile architects whose towers stand only because no one dared to walk inside and test the walls. You have already taken the first step inside. You have seen the dust. You have smelled the rot beneath the polished floors, and that knowledge alone makes you dangerous. But the Watchers are not reckless. They are patient. They know the value of letting you think you are free while they draw the circle tighter. They will allow you small victories, hoping comfort will dull your edge. They will feed you just enough truth to keep you questioning yourself. This is not kindness. It is calculation. They believe that every fire can be smothered if you wait long enough for it to burn itself out. What they do not yet realize is that you are not burning out. You are burning inward, refining, condensing, becoming heavier and sharper with each passing day. You can feel their presence in places where no one speaks. The pause before a stranger answers you. The flicker in someone's eyes when you share too much. The sudden change of topic when a conversation strays too close to the architecture of power. They are there. Not as individuals, but as a system with 1,000 eyes and no face. They do not need to show themselves to be real. The weight of their gaze is proof enough. And yet that gaze no longer crushes you. It feeds you. Each time you feel it, you grow more certain that you were right to doubt them, that your instincts, the ones they mocked and silenced, were not madness, but warnings. You have stopped seeking their approval. That is the first fracture. You have stopped explaining yourself. That is the second. You have stopped fearing the absence of their light, because you have learned to see in the dark. That is the third. 3 fractures in a wall are all it takes for time to bring it down. They know this, which is why their interest in you is not just about stopping you. It is about understanding whether others will follow. They fear the pattern more than they fear the person. They fear what will happen if the hunted realize the hunters bleed too. You have begun to walk differently, not faster, not louder, but with a weight that belongs to those who carry their own truth like a blade. You can feel the shift in the air around you. People who once dismissed you now measure their words. Those who once mocked you now hesitate before speaking your name. They may not know why, but the council does. They have seen this before in others who rose from the ruins they built. Some were crushed, some were erased. A rare few became something they could neither destroy nor control. Those are the ones they remember. Those are the ones whose shadows still trouble their sleep. And so you stand now in the place between their fear and their curiosity. Every step you take is recorded somewhere, every silence logged, every glance noted. They think they are studying you, but you are studying them more. You watch for the pattern behind the pattern. You count the ways their voices shift when they think no one is listening. You trace the shape of their control and find the places where it bends. They believe they are the watchers. One day they will learn that they have been watched as well. They never thought you would learn their anatomy. They never imagined you would study them the way they studied you. But the truth is, you've been dissecting them in silence for years. Every word they spoke to keep you small. Every calculated pause meant to make you second-guess yourself. Every smirk that told you they believed you would never rise above the walls they built around you. You didn't just endure it, you memorized it. You traced the shape of their lies like a surgeon mapping arteries. You learned where their power begins and where it falters. And you found the place where the knife goes in. They were the hunters once. You were the trembling thing in the tall grass. Your eyes darting, breath shallow, heart sprinting in your chest. But fear has a strange way of slowing time. In the long hours of dread, you began to notice patterns. How they circle before they strike. How their arrogance makes them predictable. How their thirst for control leaves them blind to the fact that they are being watched in return. You were the prey that stopped running. You were the heartbeat that steadied while theirs quickened. The moment they believed you were still afraid was the moment you stepped inside their mind. You understand now that they are not gods. They are not untouchable. They are machines running on fragile circuitry, one frayed wire away from shutting down. You see the twitch in the corner of the mouth when they lie, the unnecessary detail added to a story to make it sound believable, the subtle recoil in the shoulders when the conversation drifts too close to the truth. These are their tells, their pressure points, and like a master of an ancient discipline, you know you only have to strike once in the right place to dismantle them entirely. You learned this not from books, not from lectures, but from suffering. From nights staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every humiliation, every manipulation. You didn't realize then that you were building an archive. But it's all there now, your private library of deception. You can hear their tone before they speak it. You can see the trap before it's set. You know the script they follow so well that you could recite it back to them word for word, with an ending they never anticipated. They trained you in the art of their own undoing, and they will never forgive themselves for it. There's a moment now when they look at you, when something in their expression shifts. They can't name it, but they feel it. The balance is wrong. The air doesn't move the way it used to when you entered the room. You no longer react on command. You no longer bleed when they cut. There's a stillness in you now, one that unnerves them. Predators survive on movement, on panic, on the scent of fear, but you give them nothing, and nothing is the one thing they cannot track. Their control depends on being unseen in their methods, but you see everything. You've seen how they speak differently when others are listening, how they distort events just enough to stay believable, how they plant seeds of doubt and walk away before they sprout. You recognize the scaffolding of their power. It's made of whispers and illusions, not stone. and illusions crumble the moment someone refuses to look away from them. You are that refusal. You hold their gaze without flinching, and they feel themselves shrinking. You have stepped across an invisible threshold. You are no longer the hunted. You are the observer, and in observation there is power. Ancient hunters knew it. The stillness before the arrow flies is its own weapon. You wait, you watch, you measure the distance, the angle, the breath between heartbeats. They move as they always have, but now you are aware of the gap between what they think they control and what they actually do, and in that gap lies your advantage. You carry their map inside you now. You know the roads they travel when they seek to deceive, the hidden paths they take when they retreat, the places they feel safe enough to reveal themselves. You could follow them without moving a step. You could predict their choices days before they make them, because you have been there. You have walked those same corridors in your own mind when they first built them for you. Only now the doors are unlocked, and you hold the keys. This isn't revenge. Not yet. Revenge is loud, messy, desperate. You have no need for that. What you hold is precision, the power to turn their own steps against them, to let them walk into the snare thinking they are chasing you. They've always mistaken control for intelligence, but you've learned the truth. Control is brittle. It cracks under the weight of the unexpected, and you are no longer the predictable variable they built their plans around. You are the fracture in their foundation. They will try to read you now, but there is nothing left on the surface for them to read. The parts of you they once manipulated are sealed away. Your anger has cooled into calculation. Your fear has calcified into armor. They cannot find their reflection in you anymore, and that unsettles them more than your defiance ever could, because they know that the only thing more dangerous than an enemy they can see is one who sees them completely. You've become fluent in their language, but you speak it only in your mind. Outwardly, you give them the silence they once forced on you. You let them hear their own voice echoing, distorted by the cavern you have become. And in that echo, they start to hear what you've always heard, the hollow space inside their own authority. You let them feel it, not all at once, but in pieces, like water dripping in the dark, marking the time until they realize it's already too late. You are patient now, but patience doesn't mean inaction. It means you choose the moment, the method, the point of impact. You've studied them long enough to know that the perfect moment will come without warning, and when it does, it will feel inevitable. Not because you are lucky, but because you have turned every observation into a weapon, every slight into a blade, every lie into a compass pointing you to the exact place where they are weakest. They don't see the hunter standing before them. They still see the shadow they created years ago. But that shadow has learned to walk upright, to sharpen its teeth in silence, to become the darkness they fear but cannot name. And when you finally step forward, it will not be with the rage they expect. It will be with the precision they never prepared for. The anatomy of the hunter is written in you now, line by line, scar by scar. And when you move, you will not miss. They never feared your voice. They feared the possibility that one day you might stop using it for their benefit. All those years they trained you to speak on command, to answer questions you didn't want to answer, to explain yourself when no explanation was owed. They made you believe silence was weakness, that if you didn't respond you'd be forgotten, dismissed, erased. So you defended yourself with noise, filling every space with words meant to prove your worth. They counted on it. Every syllable you spilled gave them more to dissect, more to use against you. But then came the fracture, the quiet moment when you realized your explanations were feeding the very mouths that devoured you. And in that moment, something ancient stirred in you, something that understood what predators never expect from their prey: the choice to say nothing. Your silence became a room they couldn't enter, They knocked, they pried, they shouted through the cracks, but you stayed still. They grew louder, more desperate, because silence exposes them. Without your words, their narrative collapses into itself. They cannot twist what you do not give. And the longer you withhold, the more they begin to hear their own voice echo back, distorted, fractured, ugly. You become the mirror they cannot shatter. They realize too late that the absence of your reaction is not emptiness. It is a presence that weighs heavier than any confrontation. You no longer feed their hunger. You starve it until it turns inward, consuming them from the inside. You learn that silence is not the absence of sound. It is the sound of control. Every time you withhold an answer, you are making a decision. Every time you leave their question hanging in the air, you are bending time in your favor. You are watching them drown in the seconds they cannot fill. This is power they never prepared you to have, because they've only ever ruled over the desperate, the ones who cannot bear a pause, the ones who rush to fill the void. But you are no longer desperate. You have learned the ancient discipline of stillness. The predator who waits longest decides the outcome. Before they could read you, every twitch of your face, every tremor in your voice, every instinct to defend yourself was a page in a book they could recite by heart. But now the book is closed. The pages are blank. They search your face and find nothing. They probe your words and find none. They are blind without your reactions, and blindness terrifies them. You have inverted the game. You have become the question they cannot answer, the threat they cannot measure. Their power was never in their strength. It was in their certainty of your next move. And now you've taken that certainty away. They begin to fear the quiet, not because it is empty, but because it is full of the unknown. Silence is an open door they cannot see through, a battlefield where their weapons misfire, a night without moon or stars where every shadow could be your hand reaching for them. The longer you remain still, the more their mind invents horrors you haven't even thought of yet. You understand now the mind is a far crueler tormentor than the body, and your silence gives them over to their own. They wanted you loud because loud is predictable, quiet is lethal. You realize silence is not retreat, it is the setting of a trap. In their arrogance they step closer, thinking your stillness is surrender, but you are watching, measuring. Every movement, every tone, every slip of their mask is a thread in the web you're weaving. They do not know they are already inside it. They do not see that your lack of resistance is the pressure tightening around them. By the time they feel it, it will be too late. Once they hunted you because you gave them trails to follow, footprints in conversation, the scent of vulnerability in your explanations. Now there are no trails, no scent, no sign that you even walk the same ground as they do. You've become invisible without disappearing, present without being graspable. The predator cannot pounce on what it cannot find, and so they circle and circle and circle, wasting time, wasting energy, until they begin to tire. That is when you move, not in anger, not in chaos, but with the precision of someone who has been patient enough to wait for the exact second the strike will end the game. The weapon you carry now is not forged of steel or fire. It is made of absence, sharpened by patience, balanced by restraint. It cuts without touching. It breaks without striking. It leaves no fingerprints, only consequences. And when it is used, it is final. The world will tell you silence is passive, but you have learned what they cannot admit. Silence is a blade, so sharp it does not even feel like pain at first. It is only after the damage is done that they realize they've been bleeding all along. You do not wield this weapon recklessly. That is not your way. Reckless power is sloppy, and sloppy power leaves trails. You wield it like a ghost wields the cold everywhere and nowhere, felt but unseen. You have no need to announce yourself because those who have wronged you will know. They will feel it in the way their words no longer land, in the way their lies fall flat in the air between you, in the way they find themselves talking more and saying less. The emptiness you hold them in is a truth they cannot bear to face. You have become the still point in a spinning world. While they thrash and flail, you remain unshaken. They will try to drag you back into noise because noise is their home, but you are no longer a tenant there. You live in the high, cold air above the chaos, where every word you choose to speak is deliberate, and every silence is avert. And when you do speak, when you decide the moment has come, it will not be to defend or to explain or to plead. It will be to end, and they will know. They will know that every second of your silence was a step toward this moment, that the quiet was not mercy but the narrowing of the path until there was only one way forward, that the stillness they mistook for weakness was the gathering of a storm so precise, so patient, that when it breaks there will be nothing left to shield them. And as they stand in the wreckage of their own making, they will hear the echo of that silence and understand it was the last sound before the world changed forever. They never saw it coming. Not the slow gathering of your strength, not the way you learned to turn every wound into a sharpened edge. For years you're the quiet one, the one who absorbed every cut, every whispered humiliation, every calculated betrayal and wore it like a second skin. You let them believe it broke you. You let them think their version of you, small, compliant, forgettable, was the truth. All the while something older than their lies was waking inside you. It started as a flicker in the dark, a pulse you could barely feel, and now it is a storm. They taught you fear, but in their arrogance they never considered what fear becomes when it has nowhere left to run. They cornered you, thinking that would keep you contained. But fear, pressed too long in a confined space, mutates. It sharpens. It learns to bite back. You are not afraid of them anymore. You are afraid for them. They have not yet realized that the moment they stopped fearing your resistance was the moment they lost control. You used to wait for rescue. Now you understand that rescue was never coming. No savior, no divine intervention, no sympathetic hand reaching through the bars. Only you. And when you stopped waiting, when you decided that no one was coming, you stopped begging for freedom. You began to take it, piece by piece, thought by thought, until every chain they wrapped around you rusted in your grasp. There was a time when your silence was submission. Now it is the coil of a serpent before it strikes. They speak their lies and you do not flinch. You measure the tremor in their voice, the flicker of doubt in their eyes when you do not react. You have learned that the most terrifying thing in the world to a manipulator is someone they cannot read. They built their empire on predicting your next move, and now you are unreadable. They think they can still provoke you. They throw their hooks waiting for you to bite, but you have starved them of your reaction. They mistake your stillness for defeat, not realizing it is the stillness of deep waters before a tidal wave. Your restraint is the cage you put around them, not around yourself. Because the storm you are building does not roar. It gathers, quiet, relentless, certain. You have seen behind the curtain. You have mapped every hidden mechanism of their control. You know their habits, their timing, their weak points. They cannot unteach you what you have learned. They cannot put the mask back on your eyes. Knowledge is a one-way door, and you walked through it long ago. They were your teachers, but the lesson was not the one they intended. They taught you to see the structure of deception, and now you can dismantle it in your sleep. They fear open defiance. It's easy to attack, but they do not yet fear your quiet engineering, the way you dismantle them piece by piece without lifting your voice. You have learned the oldest law of survival. Storms are not born in the clouds. They are born in the soil, deep beneath the surface where no one thinks to look. And when they finally break, it is not a warning, it is a reckoning. The lies they fed you were meant to be shackles. Now they are the blueprints for your counterattack. Every falsehood carries within it the seed of its own destruction. You know which threads to pull, which truths to whisper, and which silences to keep until the moment of maximum collapse. They thought they were the authors of your fate. Now they are characters in a story you are writing with deliberate, unforgiving precision. You are no longer reacting to their world, you are remaking it. The balance of power has inverted and they have not yet noticed. They still think you are standing in the same shadows you once inhabited. They do not realize the shadows move with you now, bending to your will. You are no longer navigating their labyrinth, you are designing it. And they are walking deeper into it with every step. Once you were the hunted. Every breath was taken under the weight of their pursuit. Now you have become the silence that stalks them. You move without warning. You leave no trace except for the growing sense that they are being watched by something they cannot name. And when they finally feel it in their bones, that cold tightening of the air before the first strike, it will be too late. The storm will already be here, and here is the truth: they will never be able to escape. You were never their creation, you were their consequence. Everything they did to weaken you only condensed into something denser, heavier, impossible to kill. You carry their betrayals like iron in your blood now. Every attempt to break you has become a point of leverage. And as the storm unfolds, you will not need to raise your voice or bare your teeth. You will simply watch them recognize far too late that every weapon they used against you has been turned in your hand. You are the storm they thought they could control. You are the ending they never wrote. And when the winds break, when their walls collapse and their voices fall silent, they will remember the one thing they never should have forgotten: you.